And boom. Okay, well, our speaker today is Courtney S, and that is me. And first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to give a lead because it was always an opportunity for me to be in recovery. My recovery date is August the 31st of 1996. And for those that are mathematically challenged, I'm almost 26 years, but not quite. I always had that bad habit of when I come up, I'm about a month or two away here. I would go, oh, I'm not 25 years, I'm getting close to 26. And I don't know why that was, but I always wanted to get that next year. But I have not had a drink since that time. And I am amazed that I was able to do that. But then again, considering the program that I went through, maybe it's an inevitability. But I'm grateful for it. That I didn't have to get even worse than things were. For me, drinking started not as early as some people have these days. You know, I didn't really start drinking until my dad would give me beers every once in a while, and there would be wine at certain family functions, but I didn't really try any real liquor until I was 17. And one of the reasons was I was an athlete in school, and the idea of smoking or drinking was just an anathema to me because as an athlete, I was at such a high level of athletics that I just couldn't do both. I couldn't do both. It just wouldn't make any sense. Lucky, I guess. But one thing that I really did want to drink, though, because my mother would have these card parties and would have these real nice ladies into the house. It was a ladies only function. And they would sit there at these card parties. And of course, I'm a little kid with a nose about as high as the top of the card table. And I would look at these ladies, and it was I was born in 1946. So my early childhood was in the late 40s and early 50s. And so seeing a woman smoke to me was just exotic as hell. That was just over the top. And then drinking on top of that was something that was pretty exotic as well. So I had watched the women, they had these cigarette lighters that were fancy little cigarette lighters. They were like a big thing, like made out of some stone, and they would light their cigarettes. And some of them even had these long filter tips things that they would smoke. And they would sit there with their fingers in this long thing. And I'd watch this procedure as they lit their cigarettes and chit chat about cards. And they would sit there and have these cocktails, these exotic cocktails, and the big long stem glasses with martinis and stuff like that. I just thought that was just unbelievable. And so that attracted me. And then my dad was a guy who was a union organizer for the oil, chemical, and atomic workers. He was a former merchant marine guy that came back from World War II, and he had been in the merchant marine all the way from his childhood till World War II, came back out of the Coast Guard in World War II. And by the way, his Coast Guard duty, Peter, was at Treasure Island. And he was putting the submarine nets out in front of the Golden Gate Bridge and stuff like that, and engaging submarines offshore in the fog, which was pretty interesting. People don't know there were submarines, Japanese submarines, cruising around the Golden Gate Bridge. But anyway, Dad became a union boss down at the Standard Oil Refinery in California, and he got shot on the job. And the day that he got shot on the job by strike breakers, which is the wonderful times we lived in then, they also came to our house and they beat up my mother, and they beat me up and threw me down the stairs to our house, trying to force us from town. So we had to leave, and Grandpa kept our house intact, and we had to move to Sonoma, California. And Dad had to find new work. In other words, they were trying to kill him. So we had to go into hiding. And those days you could go into hiding by only going a few miles up the coast and going to Sonoma, which used to be a real rural area full of vineyards and other stuff. And but the point that I'm trying to make here is he had to get a new job, and his job was filling vending machines. He did vending machines, and they were all in bars. And so we didn't have the luxury of babysitters, and mom was doing something for work, can't remember what. And so my dad took me around to all the bars, and I'm just a little kid, and he would plop me on the bar and have the bartender make me what are they, Shirley Temples and stuff, and little non-alcoholic drinks. And I would watch everybody in the bar and watch all the guys play pool and all this stuff. And then every time Dad and I went fishing, he took me in the bars as well. When he had to have, mom wasn't with us when we went fishing, so Dad would go in and have a few toddies. So I watched this, and I really wanted to drink. I thought, oh, I can't wait till I get old enough to drink. And that happened in high school, right at the end of high school after we graduated, and it was this party. And so it was the first time I'd ever had liquor. I had had beer before, and I'd had little glass of wine with dinner or something. And so there was liquor at this party, and I was just drinking this liquor, and everybody was choking. Like a lot of they were all young guys, and they'd never drank bourbon or gin or anything like that. None of us had. And the party was at a couple's house that had a bar, and they had all these different kinds of liquors and stuff. And so we were just going around sampling all this. And everybody else was choking on the bourbon and the whiskey and stuff and going, oh, this is so hard to get down. And to me, it tasted like cough syrup almost. It was like candy. And I thought, this stuff's great. And of course, being stupid, I drank myself right into a blackout first time. Completely blacked out. Don't remember what happened. Everybody made stories up, I'm sure. But I don't know what the hell happened. And that was my first blackout. And so I had to go play college football. So I kind of slacked off in my drinking for a while. It was only beer, but I got into a fraternity that was a drinking fraternity, drinking and football. It was a sports fraternity, the Delta Phi's, you buggers. And so I got into that, and we were the top school, small college in California at the time, had a lot of guys that went on to play in the pros, and almost me too. And we went to a bowl game, and just before the bowl game, I was thrown off the team for excessive drinking at a frat party in which a disturbance broke out, and I was one of the main instigators of that disturbance. So that was my first real consequence of drinking, was that. And then I went shortly after that happened, I had to go to work for a living, which turned out to be great. I love working, and I made a lot of money, but I was pre-med in school, so I never did follow up on my medical education. I just worked. And so as time went on, I was driving tow trucks and wreckers and stuff, and I was drinking, and without too many consequences. And then when I turned 21, I got a job in Ecuador diving. This is crazy, on a dredger, working up in a river system in the north end of Ecuador, Mike. And there was a going away party for that. And I went to the going away party, and I got a DUI that night. I couldn't even find I was standing out in the parking lot trying to put my keys in the door, and the police were sitting there watching me do this bemusedly and arrested me. So I got my first DUI right there. So that was a definite consequence of drinking. My drinking got so bad, and my disturbances in town got so bad after I came back from Ecuador, that I was asked to leave town at 26 years old. And I was brought to a judge's office in his chambers, went back in his chambers. I remember him sitting there in a robe, and he was a judge that I knew from my youth. And he said, you're going to have to leave town, because the next time I see you in front of me or in this court or anything, we're going to put you away for a while. And this was over not just drinking, it was over my behavior, just in general, many things. Mostly had to do with fights and things. And so that was during Vietnam. And that was in 72. And so they suggested I go down and enlist in the military and get out of town. and it's more than suggested. And so I went down to the Army recruiter and I took the darn test that they had. And the guy said, hey, he said, you scored really high on this damn test. He said, I suggest you may think about another branch of the service. And no offense to any Army guys, by the way. And so I said, well, what do you suggest? And he said, he said, the two best training opportunities that we have, you know, for your career or whatever you want to do is Navy or Air Force. They have two of the best enlisted training opportunities. So I said, well, the Navy or the Air Force? So I thought, well, the Air Force is cool. I like airplanes. So, and I had also had my private airplane license by then. I had been flying for a while, so Air Force made sense. So I said, okay, Air Force. Got into the Air Force, ended up in, I ended up in basic training, and you can't drink in basic training, which was a real drag. And I couldn't wait to get out. And the day we got out, we got transferred to another base and went up to Wichita Falls, Texas for my basic medical training in the Air Force, which my career was medical. And I got drunker than a skunk and blacked out again, second blackout, and was carried back to the barracks. But so all I can say about the military is, well, I can say a lot of things about it. It was really good for my career, but I learned how to drink really well in the military. Drinking was allowed, and I would get into trouble, and it was just overlooked. And I didn't really have any consequences, except for I had come home from a bar one night, and I drove over the guard post. I went right through it, right through the guard post on the way home at Gate 7, Keesler Air Force Base. And the SPs didn't appreciate that in the slightest. They bailed out both sides, and my car was wrecked. And so the Air Force said, well, you can't have a car anymore. We should get you a bicycle, and we don't want you driving anymore. That was their answer, not throwing in a drunk tank or anything. But like, I always managed to stay achieving things. And while I was in the Air Force, I was decorated, got the Air Force Commendation Medal. I was also the Airman of the Year for the entire Air Training Command, which is pretty high honor. And made E5 in 3 years, which is pretty good, not being on the battlefield. And my career was a medic, and I also started the first ultrasound system for the Air Force. So they put me into research and development, and I worked in diagnostic ultrasound. I also did radiation therapy treatment planning with using ultrasound parameters. I was a special procedures X-ray technologist, in which I also built catheters and guide wires and stuff. And I had research being done on cross-sectional anatomy. That was a forte of mine, was anatomy. And cross-sectional anatomy had not been, there were no textbooks on cross-sectional anatomy at that time in the 70s, early 70s. There was nothing that used cross-sectional anatomy except for diagnostic ultrasound. And there were no CAT scanners yet. There were no MRIs. So you were looking at a two-dimensional picture on X-ray, you know, so I was good at that. And what I did was I went over and got cadavers, since there was no textbook. And I went into the our chow hall at the hospital. This is a large regional medical center, second largest in the Air Force. And I got a meat saw, and I sawed all the cadavers into sections and then traced the outlines of the organs that were in there to make a cross-sectional anatomy guideline in text, and published some of that. And I also published some of my radiation therapy treatment planning, which was done before they had those. And so my papers were getting published. I had the research lab, so I built an ultrasound machine that could see grayscale in two-dimensional images. And before that, we only had bistable, which was like looking at you either had a dot or no dot. There was no grayscale gradations to tissue density or tissue characterization. So anyway, this was getting noticed by a lot of people on the outside and commercial world, because diagnostic ultrasound was starting to take off, and so were some other things at that time. And so the first attempt to get me out of the Air Force was made by a company. They came and tried to get me out, but the Air Force wouldn't let me go because I had established the ultrasound program and we were training people on what to do. We were going out to the Navy and going back and forth doing a bunch of stuff, trying to get people ramped up and trained on this stuff. And at the same time, I was selected for the prisoner of war issue as well. So I couldn't sleep in my barracks anymore. I had to sleep in the hospital wards with the prisoners of war that were coming back from the Hanoi Hilton and other places in Vietnam. And the reason for that is because the press was outside the hospital trying to interview all the medics and everything, and they wouldn't let us out. So we sat with Marine guards on these POWs. And the reason for that was they had the Geneva Peace Accords going on at that time. And they did not want that to be disrupted by news releases of what torture those prisoners had received. And it was ghastly, is all I can tell you. And so we slept up there. So I was doing all of these things all at the same time. And on top of that, I like money at that time. I wanted more money than the military would pay me. And so I got a job as a captain of a shrimp boat in Biloxi, Mississippi. Bubba Gump Shrimp. Yes. It's hard to explain all this stuff, but that was a weekend job. And so I would leave the base on Friday night and ride my bicycle down to the shrimp boat and take the boat out with the crew. And the captain could go home and get some rest. He would be out there all night long during shrimp season. Shrimp season is only a little while. And so, so I had that job as well. And anyway, long story short, I got finally, when I had only 3 months to go, the University of Texas, at MD Anderson Medical Center, which is the largest cancer center in the world, one of the most advanced cancer treatment planning places in the world, sent a letter and a request to the Surgeon General of the military to have me transferred from there and get out early and go to MD Anderson because they had a tissue characterization project that they were working on. And they wanted me to be a part of that because I was establishing a national presence at that time. So I got out 3 months early, went to Houston, Texas, and became the director of the ultrasound facilities at MD Anderson. And when you get into a university situation in medicine, it's publish or perish. And so everybody, including me, not being a doctor, I had to publish as well. I did so, and I had papers accepted at the Radiological Society of North America, the largest radiology meeting in the world, in Chicago, at the RSNA in Chicago. I went for several years. And I also had my papers accepted at the World Federation of Ultrasound Medicine Biology. And that particular year it was accepted. It was in San Francisco. So, hey, Peter, I got to go back home and stay up in the, right up on top of a Nob Hill there at the, I forgot the name of the hotel. It's so stupid. Anyway, I can't remember it, but it's very fancy hotel. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. But anyway, so I was gaining all this prominence and ended up after a very brief stint at MD Anderson. I also took some medical training there as well in gastroenterology, radiology, and I was hired by Johnson & Johnson, a small company of Johnson & Johnson, out of there at about a zillion times my salary that I had. And, this is 1976, 77 now, and I am making $250,000 a year. It was a lot of money in those days, so I was hired in a PhD position. And even though I had to go to summer school to get out of high school, I had no college except for the part where I was thrown out. And so no credits or anything. And I was hired under their Savant program. And that is give these little kids a chance, I guess. And anyway, my desk mate that worked in the desk right next to me was a PhD from NASA, which was hilarious. But we were all involved in ultrasound, building the first ultrasound machines. and training people and doing all that. So what that did is it sent me all over the world to every major medical institution in the world. And I was trying to build a couple of new machines, one for carotid imaging, for the superficial imaging of the carotid artery, and other superficial vascular imaging stuff. So I was given a faculty position at Bowman Gray School of Medicine at Wake Forest University, and I was on the medical staff there in 1977. And they actually moved me to live there. Yet I was still working for my company, traveling around the world and being a shared professor at Bowman Gray. And so what I did was I instructed all the international physicians that are coming there for training in cross-sectional anatomy. That was my thing. And physics, the physics of ultrasounds. Doctors don't like physics as a rule. That's not their favorite subject. So I taught those courses, and I was on full medical staff. And the best thing about that was I got parking right up in front, free parking, really cool. And then when my daughter was born, my first daughter, she was born there at that hospital, and I got to go in and be with my wife during the delivery, which was unheard of in those days. They did not let men go in, the husbands go in. So that was a real treat to be able to do that, and also had one of the best OBGYNs in the entire world deliver my daughter. And then after that, a few years later, I was transferred out to Denver, Colorado, lived up there for a while. And in Denver, let's see, how many DUIs did I have by then? Let's see, I think all the rest of them happened after that. So I was transferred to Denver, and that was a pretty high prestigious position within Johnson & Johnson at that time, because I was the guy who I had patented 2 pieces of software for our medical imaging systems. And I had designed also a new real-time ultrasound machine, co-designed with a Stanford PhD, and was involved in taking that technology to countries like, well, most of the countries in Europe. I had time in England and time in Holland and time in Austria, time in Germany, doing that, some stuff in South America. And I went to every province of Canada. I don't care where it was, every province. But finally, I was out in San Diego and I was at the VA hospital in San Diego, which is a real good one, real big. And I was coming back to my hotel, and I got arrested for DUI, a second DUI. That was not a good one, because in San Diego, they're very nasty. Again, I had money, so I paid lawyers and got out of these. Not got out, I mean, I had to pay money, but they didn't take your driver's license or anything like that then. I just had the lawyers go and take care of these things. It wasn't a lot. And then I came back to Denver, and I was driving several doctors in a van back to their hotel, part of the company thing, and I got another DUI. And shortly after that, I got arrested for drunk and disorderly, and I got arrested for assault and on a battery on a police officer, felony. I don't arrest real well. And it's hilarious to see a guy that's been in a scrap with a bunch of cops, and a real scrap, and in a 3-piece suit. Because when you get to jail, everybody's looking at you like, what the hell happened to you? And I said, never fight the police. So things started spinning out of control. And one of the things that happened to me was I could either be a real nice guy, or I could be completely aggressive. And it was no guarantees one way or the other. And I began to have less and less of a switch. And as things progressed, the company started to notice things. At first, they didn't do anything about it. And, just like the military, they didn't do anything about it. And my last arrest was in 1981 in Tampa Bay, Florida, driving a company car back to my I lived in a condo on the ocean right there then. And Burt Reynolds lived next door to me, to give you an idea what kind of condos I was living in. And I was coming home from a retirement party, and it was probably the least drunk I was ever when I was arrested. I was caught in one of those traffic stops, and I just went over the Clearwater Pass Bridge, and I couldn't back up because the damn bridge was open. The company didn't really do much about it, but what it did do is that it was the first time that I lost my driver's license, and it took me a couple of days and a lot of money to get it back, but nevertheless. So what I decided to do after that point, I still hadn't learned my lessons. The first time I came in contact with a DUI school, and I just thought it was a joke. I had beer out in the car for that. The long story short, things started going downhill after that, and I started not driving so much to keep out of trouble. And I started taking the back way to everywhere. And I had been transferred over to the Fort Lauderdale area, and drinking was getting bad, and I'd lost my job. And I started working for smaller and smaller companies and started doing smaller and smaller things. And then finally went back to just doing clinical work, which was my clinical training and my clinical credentials in diagnostic ultrasound and x-ray and all that. So I just drank myself down. And the very last day that I was out there, I got into an argument and got into a fight that turned out getting me arrested for that. And I wasn't arrested that day. The fight ended and all the stuff stopped. And I was arrested at my house by a tactical team. And the Pompano Beach Police Department was there then. That was before they went to Broward Sheriff's. And they sent a whole tactical crew out and broke my door down, came through the door full blast. And when I had come home from work, I was still working, and took me out in handcuffs in front of everybody in the complex that I lived in, which was a very classy place. It was pretty spectacular, ruined my reputation, but I was mortified. I was 50 years old, and I hadn't got any better than that. And I was drinking like a fish. And when I was put in jail, I sat in jail, and I wasn't drunk. I had sobered up, before I went to jail when they came and got me. And I just thought everything's over. I said, there's something totally wrong with me. And I couldn't talk to anybody. I could barely be booked into, I wouldn't even answer the booking people their questions. And I thought, well, I'm being arrested for a fight here. I don't know. I thought I still was so screwed up that I did not really believe that that I had a drinking problem. I sort of thought so, but I just didn't really believe it. So he said, you got to go to AA in order to stay to, I think one meeting a week or something. I forget what it was. So my wife came to pick me up to get released from jail, and took me home. And the first thing that was on my mind was, I've been in this place for a while. You got to get me to a 7-Eleven so I can get some beer. And she said, no, we're going to a meeting. And I said, and CA before that, and we had been married for 9 years, and I had no knowledge of it whatsoever. And so I was completely surprised by that. She knew where to go and where the meeting was. And I went to the meeting, and I went inside, and it was a double lead meeting. In other words, two guys about my age were speaking. And so I sat in the back, of course, and unbeknownst to me, there was more than one friend of mine that were in the meeting. But one of the guys was Taxi Dave, was in the meeting. Everybody in Florida, by the way, in AA has a nickname. Taxi Dave was the guy who I used to lose my car all the time when I got drunk, and he would take me around trying to find it in the taxi. So he came over and he sat down next to me and he slapped the big book down and he said, here, you're going to need this. And he said, I'm your sponsor. And so, okay, and so I picked up a white chip that night. And I'm not much of on the emotion side at that time. And I got up there and I remember I was walking up there and in front of everybody, it's about a 400 person double lead meeting. It's huge. And I had to walk all the way up to the front to get this white chip. And I started halfway up. I knew it. Oh my God, I'm going to get emotional about this. And I just felt like the monkey was off my back in a way that, oh, this is what's wrong with you, Courtney. This is why all this crap has happened to you. And you constantly can't keep screwing stuff up. I just felt like something had happened. So when I came back and sat down, Dave said, don't leave, because afterwards we got something for you to do. You need to do some service here for us. And he said, oh, we got 2 coffee pots that need to be cleaned up. We need to help with these chairs and everything. He said, you come with me. So I did that. And I started doing regular service. I kept going every day. In fact, I came home to my wife one night, who was really happy to see me succeeding at this shit. She said, I never thought you'd be able to do this. And I said, well, Joyce, those people need me. They need me. They don't know how to pick up the chairs. They don't know how to do the coffee. They make crappy coffee. And nobody cleans up afterwards. They just all go outside and smoke cigarettes and shit. And I stopped smoking the same day, by the way, because I could not conceive of alcohol in cigarettes. Just me personally here. Now, I'm not talking about anybody else, but I could not quit alcohol if I was going to smoke. And I couldn't quit smoking if I was going to drink. Those two were just completely together. In fact, my smoking had always been at that point rather limited until I drank. And then I would, down a whole pack without even thinking. So I started doing service, and I just basically continued to do a crap load of service. And I just kept at it year after year. I did every service position that you could possibly think of. I spent my first 5 years in Florida in recovery, doing all kinds of different service. Won't bore you with that. But I really started doing service when I moved to West Virginia, in order to get involved in the community, because I came here and I go, oh my God, I had to leave my Florida peeps. This is gonna get up here. And West Virginia was just so freaking religious. It was unbelievable. And I was struggling with the religious part at that point, real hard. And so what I did on the religious point was I told my sponsor right from the get-go, it's not going to work for me, the God stuff and everything. And he said, well, his big thing was the 24-hour plan, and I agree with him, 24-hour plan. And so he said, the way we do the 24-hour plan is we have a prayer in the morning and a prayer in the evening. And I said, well, who am I going to pray to? And he said, tell you what, Courtney, I'll give you a prayer if you can do this. And it said, help me a drunk stay away from a drink or a drug or a substitute today. That's it. And at the nighttime was, thank you for helping me stay away from a drink or a drug or a substitute today. That was Johnny's prayer. And I said, does it matter if God's in there? He says, not unless it matters to you, So I thought, okay. So I started every day with that petition for help. And my petition was to the universe, or to the body alcoholic, as I like to call it. And I closed the end of the day as well. So I was paranoid about not having that prayer in the morning and not closing at night. I thought that was one of the big secrets. And sure enough, that turned out to be true. Here in West Virginia, again, I ran up against a bunch of religious stuff, and it was very hard here. And in 2014, I began to become aware of that there was a secular AA. And by 2016, I couldn't go. In 2014, I couldn't go to the one out in Santa Monica because of a serious conflict, and my weightlifting stuff, which I haven't even spoke about. But so in 2016, I went to Austin, and Mike was there as well. And in Austin, I was elected to the board of directors for secular AA, and started working with them heavily. From that point forward, was organized and was one of the lead people for the 2018 in Toronto thing. that went on up there, and I took over the IT stuff for secular AA, and stayed involved in service. And in service, I've been in multiple area positions. I've been DCM, I've been GSRs and stuff a zillion times, been treasurers, been just about everything you think of. I've been a panelist for the ICIPA, which is the young people's, to show an older point of view. And in the ICIPAs, I also did a panel on secularism, which was really not well received. And I've done SASA, which is like, for those on the West Coast know what PRASA is, it's a service assembly. I did the concepts for SASA. I did an entire presentation on the concepts, which is a big deal. I'm an AWOL graduate. And AWOL is an alcoholic way of life, which was conceived of by Dr. Bob. And I spent 5 years in AWOL and was an instructor in AWOL. And it is an intense step study group. And I was still able to do that with my understanding of not having a higher power that everybody else did. And I've just done a shitload of service in AA and a lot of things. And I came from real hardcore God-fearing AA, and the same around here, but was able to make the transition from there rather handily to secular AA. And I thought, I'll just say one thing about it. It helped me a great deal in my discipline in recovery to have that fundamental background of steps and step study. Now, I know that irritates a lot of people, but it was something that I needed. I needed mental and physical discipline. I needed to be literally taken by the hand and shown effective ways to recovery. And so I took it to heart what people said. I just turned a little filter in my head that whenever they got off in the God stuff, I went, well, that's his business. That's not my business. That's his business or her business, you know. And the only time I ever rejected vociferously any of that stuff is when they got on my case about my expression of my secularism. And I would often return that to them, and I don't do that much anymore. And it's not productive either. So anyway, I found a wonderful way to keep my sobriety going, and service is extraordinarily important to me. And as most of you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I consider it integral to my recovery. And I had just read this morning, I was reading something from Mass General Hospital and Harvard University on recovery. There's a recovery institute there, and they're talking about different methods of recovery. And I was looking at one particular component, and they were talking about how it's possible that people don't even need any kind of structure for recovery, that they can recover on their own. And I was looking at that. This is from someone who is looking scientifically at it, a group. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And that's a more modern approach to the thing. So I'm still learning. And I'm trying to stay healthy. I'm 76 years old now. Came in when I was 50. And one thing that, this is the last thing I'll just close with, the thing that struck me when I first came in the room was I realized exactly how old I was. 50 was a big sentinel moment for me in a way. And I thought, Jesus, you screwed up your whole life, 50 years old. This is what you've come to, is jails and AA, and you're sitting in the back of a room with drunks, you know, and it really floored me in a way. And I thought, in recovery, those first year or so of recovery, I was paranoid, especially the first 6 months. I was paranoid that I was not going to have enough money to retire on, because I was $250,000 in the hole to the IRS. And I had a felony hanging over my head, which thank God for good lawyers, and also some other circumstances. So I knew I needed to work, and I knew I wanted to be healthy because I wanted to add another 50 years. It's just a good round number. And I thought, well, if you're going to live and enjoy your retirement, because up to this point, it's been a little touchy. You need to take care of your health. So I got really fanatic about health. And I'm not going to go into all of that. I'm just going to say I got fanatic and I took it really seriously. It was as serious almost as my AA, maybe as much as my AA work. So so I started paying attention to nutrition really tightly, and I had a medical background, so I'm used to studying shit, and looking at stuff, and good experience there. And I got involved in a physical activity because I have to do activities. I just can't sit and do nothing. And I wanted to work and make money. So I was working to make money, and I was being as healthy as I could and eating a proper diet and sleeping and doing all those other things. And it just made everything so much better. And it was exponential as it increased. So that's where I'm at today. And, so I have no major medical issues outside of some structural stuff that I did weightlifting, broke a few things and had shoulders replaced and stuff. But I take one pill a day, and it's a thyroid pill. And the only reason I'm taking a thyroid pill is I had a radiation accident in the radiation therapy laboratory where a cobalt source came out without an alarm going off, and I got zapped. And it tore my thyroid a new one because I had a therapy phantom and I was right at thyroid level, and I got nailed. So I take levothyroxine, and I take a pretty low dose of that, only 112 milligrams, which is a pretty low dose. And that's it, nothing else. But I've had a heart attack, and I've had blood clots from doing some weightlifting stuff, but I made it through all of those because I was healthy and I wasn't smoking. Big deal there. And my heart attack was a blood clot, one stent, cleared up, good ever since. Went from 30% ejection fraction after the heart attack during there to 70% in 2 months by training and being healthy. So 70% ejection fraction is freaking good. So, that's where most people are anyway. And that happens to be my field, especially is cardiology. So anyway, so I was able to recover through Alcoholics Anonymous, and secular AA helped in the end, made life just like it was a little dressing, cherry on the top. So anyway, thanks for listening. And it's such a weird life and so many different things that it's hard to do that in a share. But I hope I got the impression apart that it is possible recovering in a religious environment if you're stuck there, if you adjust. And then nowadays, of course, we don't have to talk about that. And for me, the steps were really critical, very critical for me personally. Anyway, thanks very much. That's all I got. And let me figure out how to turn this thing off, and we'll do that. Yes.